Gulf Air Flight 72 was cleared to land with surface winds from 90 at 8 knots on the evening of August 23, 2000. The Airbus A320 was on its final approach to Bahrain International Airport, when what began as a routine landing quickly escalated into a critical situation. Flight 72 aligned with the runway from a distance of 9 nautical miles. However, the aircraft was not properly configured for landing. The pilots encountered an urgent predicament as their airspeed spiraled out of control, reaching 313 knots, with the runway rapidly approaching. They needed to take immediate action to regain control of the aircraft. Would they manage to avert disaster, or would this flight end tragically just moments before touchdown? Join us as we explore the events surrounding Gulf Air Flight 72. On the afternoon of August 23, 2000, a Gulf Air Airbus A320, registered as a 4EK, commenced boarding in Cairo, Egypt, for Flight 72 to Bahrain. The flight crew was relatively young and inexperienced, led by 37-year-old Captain Ian Shakib, accompanied by 25-year-old First Officer Khalaf al-Alawi. Captain Shakib, a Bahraini national, had accumulated approximately 4,400 flying hours, with only 86 of those as pilot in command. Colleagues who had flown with him characterized him as responsible, knowledgeable, receptive to suggestions, and professional. The first officer, an Omani, was even less experienced, with just 608 flight hours. He had initially failed his proficiency check in the R320, receiving low marks in various areas, including landing procedures and engine failure protocols, but had undergone additional training thereafter. The pilot successfully completed his proficiency check and commenced line training. Colleagues from Gulf Air, who had previously flown with him, characterized him as timid, meek, mild, polite, shy, and reserved in social interactions. On this particular flight, he served as the monitoring pilot for Flight 72, which carried 135 passengers and 6 flight attendants, totaling 143 individuals on board. The passengers represented a diverse array of 17 different nationalities. At 4:52 p.m. local time, after all pre-flight checks were finalized, the pilots initiated the engines and the aircraft was pushed back from the gate. Flight 72 experienced a delay of 52 minutes due to a navigational error that directed the pilots to the incorrect gate, consequently postponing their anticipated landing in Bahrain into the later hours of darkness. Upon reaching the runway, the pilots awaited clearance, and after receiving it, they accelerated down the runway, taking off smoothly and climbing steadily into the evening sky, leaving Cairo behind. As night descended over Arabia, the passengers settled in for their journey eastward to Bahrain. By 7:21 p.m. Flight 72 was well into its descent and in communication with approach control in Dammam, located on the Saudi Arabian coast across the strait from Bahrain. Descending from an altitude of 14,000 feet and 30 nautical miles from the airport, the crew received authorization to commence their approach. Creating such videos demands considerable time and effort, and at times, I find it necessary to take a break. One of my preferred methods of relaxation is watching movies. However, I often encounter challenges in doing so. Not all content is accessible in the Netherlands on platforms such as Netflix. This is where today's sponsor, private internet access, becomes essential. With private internet access, you can access content from around the globe by selecting a server in a different location. This allows me to enjoy my favorite film, Top Gun, from the US library, even if it is not available in my country. Furthermore, when using an unprotected device like a phone, computer, or tablet, your device transmits a significant amount of information that can be intercepted by various entities before reaching the desired website. Private internet access can conceal your IP address and protect your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel, thereby safeguarding your digital presence from those who may seek to exploit your personal information. Trusted by millions of users, Private Internet Access boasts an excellent rating on Trustpilot and offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, making it completely risk-free. Additionally, it adheres to a strict no-logs policy, ensuring that your data is never stored. By using my link, you can secure an 83% discount on Private Internet Access, which amounts to just $2.30 per month, and you will also receive 4 additional months at no extra cost. Please use my link in the pinned comment or video description to take advantage of this special offer. Now, returning to the video, the captain confirmed the clearance, enabling them to proceed to the initial approach for runway 12. This required a descent to 3,500 feet, followed by contacting Bahrain Approach Control for further instructions. The captain then addressed his first officer, directing him to initiate radio communication with Bahrain Approach and to request confirmation from the controller regarding their landing on runway 12 at Bahrain International Airport. This airport, located on the northern coast of Bahrain, features a single runway that measures 3,956 meters in length and 60 meters in width. It is equipped with high-intensity approach and runway lights to improve visibility during landings, particularly in low-visibility conditions. First Officer Alawi established communication with Bahrain Approach, and the controller responded by clearing them for the approach, while asking them to confirm their altitude at 3,500 feet. Typically, flights from Dammam are instructed to descend to this altitude before being transferred to Bahrain. The controller sought to verify this clearance, however, Captain Shakib had a different interpretation. He believed they were cleared to 7,000 feet and instructed the first officer to convey this incorrect information to Bahrain Approach. The first officer complied, and the controller then instructed the crew to continue their descent to 3,500 feet. In reality, they had indeed been cleared to descend to this altitude as per Dammam's clearance of 3,500 feet. This misunderstanding resulted in a significant deviation from the intended flight path, necessitating an increase in speed as the crew needed to descend rapidly. While the flight crew completed their approach checklist, the controller further instructed them to descend to 15 feet and to report when they were established on the final approach course for the VDME instrument approach to runway 12. The approach necessitated meticulous navigation and precise altitude adjustments at designated points. The VHF omnidirectional range, VOR, serves as a globally utilized radio beacon, including at Bahrain Airport. It transmits signals in all directions, assisting pilots in determining their location and maintaining their course. Distance Measuring Equipment (DME) offers a digital display indicating the distance to the VOR beacon, enabling pilots to track their distance and make necessary altitude modifications to ensure adherence to the correct approach path to the runway. While VOR/DME approaches can present challenges, particularly in adverse weather conditions, the weather over the Gulf that evening was exceptionally clear, with minimal cloud cover. This favorable condition eliminated typical obstacles such as restricted visibility or turbulence, allowing pilots to concentrate on their instruments without the additional pressure of navigating through clouds or turbulent air. For this approach, the pilots were required to navigate towards the VOR beacon on a heading of 121. They depended on their instruments to maintain alignment with the beacon as they progressed. By 7:25 p.m., Flight 72 was positioned 9 nautical miles from the runway, yet their airspeed was alarmingly high, reaching 313 knots following a rapid descent. According to standard VOR/DME approach procedures, the aircraft should be stabilized and fully configured for landing by the final approach fix, FAFAF, which is located 5 nautical miles from the runway. This entails having the landing gear deployed, flaps extended, and the appropriate airspeed maintained. As they neared the FAF, the captain issued instructions to the crew. First officer to report that they were established on the V. The first officer radioed air traffic control, and Bahrain approach cleared them to conduct the VOR DME approach, and instructed them to contact Bahrain Tower. As they descended further, the aircraft failed to lose sufficient speed, and altitude reaching 1,678 FD and 224 knots, when the captain instructed the first officer to set the flaps to position 1 and lower the landing gear. Immediately after that, Flight 72 reached the approach fix C till nowhere near. Configured the speed was 223 knots instead of 136 knots. The flaps were set to position 1 instead of full, and the altitude was 1,662 instead of 1,500 feet. A successful landing seemed unlikely at this moment at this mace point. Standard operating procedures called for the pilots to make a missed approach, circle back, and try again. Instead, the captain announced visual with the airfield and switched from VDME approach procedures to visual approach procedures by disengaging the autopilot and flight dirt. ECTOR, although the auto throttles remained engaged, by abandoning the stricter instrument-based VDME approach and switching to visual flight rules, he seemingly bought himself more time to configure the aircraft. But seconds later, it finally dawned on the captain that they weren't going to make it, realizing that a successful landing could not be achieved from that point in the approach. The captain requested clearance to conduct a 360 left turn, which the controller approved. He then ordered the first officer to set the flaps to position 2 in an attempt to. The captain decided to reduce altitude and airspeed and initiate a turn without prior consultation with his first officer, lacking any legitimate operational justification for this maneuver. The appropriate procedure would have been to level off, maintain a straight flight path, ascend to 2,000 feet, and execute a circling approach for another attempt, adhering to the standard missed approach protocol for runway 2. As the captain commenced a left turn to initiate the orbit, he did so from a distance of 9/10 of a nautical mile from the runway. During this maneuver, he called for flaps 3, followed by flaps full, thereby configuring the aircraft for landing. However, the decision to select flaps full was inappropriate, as this setting is reserved for the final stages of flight, such as approach and landing, due to the significant drag it produces. Flaps full should not be utilized for maneuvering during a turn. Throughout the turn, the captain struggled to maintain a steady bank angle or pitch attitude, resulting in the aircraft's altitude varying between 965 feet and 332 feet above ground level, with the bank angle peaking at approximately 36 degrees. The aircraft's approach appeared unusually tight to the tower controller, who had never witnessed such a maneuver and even requested a colleague to observe. At 7:29 p.m., the captain leveled the wings on a heading of approximately 211 degrees, at which point the aircraft was crossing the extended runway centerline. Acknowledging their position, the captain noted that they had overshot the runway and subsequently initiated a left turn, instructing First Officer Al-Alawi to notify the controller that they were going around. The auto throttle was disengaged during this process. During takeoff, the power was selected, and the controller directed the crew to maintain a heading of 300 degrees while climbing to an altitude of 2,500 feet. Concurrently, the flaps were adjusted to position 3, and the landing gear was retracted as the aircraft crossed the runway. However, as the wings leveled out, the oral flap overspeed warning activated, indicating an airspeed of 191 knots, which exceeded the 185 knot limit for flaps in position 3. The aircraft was now en route toward the Gulf, and the situation worsened when the lights of Bahrain Airport vanished after passing the runway, leaving the pilots in complete darkness as the moonless night offered no visual cues. With the thrust set to TOGA and no visible horizon, the captain perceived that they were climbing, a misjudgment that proved critical. In a moment of panic, he pushed the side stick forward, causing the aircraft's pitch to drop sharply from a nose-up to a nose-down attitude, resulting in a rapid increase in airspeed. As the aircraft descended through approximately 1,000 feet, the ground proximity warning system activated a sink rate alert, urging the pilot to pull up. Despite the warnings, the captain commanded the flaps to be raised and attempted to position the side stick for a nose-up attitude. However, this command was not sustained. The aircraft continued its descent and, mere seconds later, crashed into the Persian Gulf, resulting in the tragic loss of all 143 passengers and crew members on board. News of the disaster spread rapidly, sending shockwaves throughout the Gulf region and beyond. At the crash site, located approximately 4 kilometers northeast of the airport, rescue teams and divers began their search efforts. Investigators searched through debris, located approximately 3 meters underwater, for the remains of the victims. Upon reviewing the black boxes, they found that after initiating a go-around, the aircraft experienced a slight climb before descending directly into the ocean. The official report regarding the crash of Gulf Air Flight 72 was released by the Bahraini aviation authorities on July 10, 2002. The investigation indicated that the delay in departure, coupled with the challenges of night flying, likely led to cognitive overload for the crew. This issue was further intensified by the captain's inexperience, as he had only logged 86 hours as pilot in command of the A320 and was still becoming acquainted with the aircraft systems. A detailed examination of the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder revealed increasing confusion and miscommunication among the crew. The absence of a proper approach briefing and the rushed nature of the descent were critical factors contributing to the tragedy. During the acceleration with TOG, our power in complete darkness, the somatogravic illusion likely caused Captain Shakib to mistakenly perceive that the aircraft was pitching up, prompting him to apply a nose-down input, which ultimately led to the aircraft's descent into the sea. This incident highlights the necessity for comprehensive and systematic training programs. Currently, pilots undergo extensive training that incorporates advanced simulations of complex scenarios, including spatial disorientation and high-stress decision-making. Following the accident, the Emir of Bahrain declared 3 days of national mourning, and Gulf Air subsequently retired the flight number 72, replacing it with flight number 70 for inbound flights from Cairo to Bahrain.